right, good morning, everyone. Dr. Coley, thanks for starting us off on a hot topic. This is literally another hot topic. So I'd like to invite our esteemed panelists first, Dr. Bente Mikkelsen, Dr. Purnima Prabhakaran, Dr. Maria Fernandez, Dr. Maria Nera. If you could please come to the podium. My name is Nupur Narula. I'm a cardiologist. I'm a vascular medicine specialist at Weill Cornell Medicine in New York City in New York. I direct the vascular diagnostic laboratory there, as well as the Women's Heart Program, and thereby I really combine all body vascular health, genetics, and maternal health. I'm very honored to talk about this important topic today. If I could have the slides. Thank you. So I really want to set the stage for indoor air pollution as a first step. And I'd like to do this by really highlighting the work of the Horace Group of investigators. So the Horace Group of investigators includes Dr. Gregory Thomas, Dr. Randall Thompson, Dr. Abella Lam, the Sutherlands, Dr. Jagat Narula, and they've now studied cardiovascular disease in nearly 300 mummies or human remains from all over the world, using modern technologies such as CT scans. Now, they traveled to the Andes Mountains in Peru, where they looked at naturally mummified remains of farmers and manual laborers. Approximately half of this population was vegetarian. The other half ate lean meat, such as alpaca. And as a result, this group of investigators felt that the population would have evaded cardiovascular disease. The exact opposite was true. And what we actually see is that approximately 25% of this population had evidence of vascular calcification or disease. We also note that they had simultaneous presence of black lungs. So let's move on. The group of investigators subsequently traveled to the Aleutian Islands. They traveled to Greenland. They traveled to the Southwest United States. And they found similar patterns of calcification. What did all these populations have in common? They all lived in low-ceiling houses. They all lived in subterranean houses. They lived in igloos. They lived in pit holes. They lit fires for warmth. They cooked indoors. They were exposed to indoor air pollution. They were exposed to smoke-filled environs. So with that, we have a few objectives today. We're going to discuss the link between indoor air pollution and cardiovascular health. We're going to review the main contributors to indoor air pollution. We're going to look at the impact of indoor air pollution on vulnerable populations. We're going to discuss mitigation strategies and public health solutions. And we're going to review advocacy for action on indoor air pollution. And we're going to do this with the help of our esteemed panel, Dr. Maria Nera, WHO Director of Public Health, Environment, and Social Determinants of Health, Dr. Purnima Prabhakaran, Director of the Center for Health Analytic Trends and Strategy at Trivedi School of Biosciences, Dr. Maria Fernandez, the Vice President of Population Health and Implementation Science at UT Health Houston, and Dr. Bente Mikkelsen, of course, we've heard multiple times yesterday, the Director of Global Engagement Strategies at St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. And to begin this session, we're going to highlight and start with the Pacesetter lecture by Annie Griffiths, photographer for National Geographic, who has really photographed kitchens from over 100 countries and really highlights the impact of visual storytelling here.
Good morning, and thank you for the privilege of speaking to this elite group, led by my brilliant friend, Dr. Jagat Narula. It's also an honor to present to a gathering of people who not only understand, but can help bring attention to this global scourge. I wish I could be with you in person, but as you view this short presentation, I will be photographing on a ship in Glacier Bay, Alaska. I became interested in the health impact of indoor pollution as I sat in smoky kitchens of families in dozens of countries. I heard the constant coughing and watched the teary eyes and witnessed the horrible burns caused by open flames in small places. I would like to share with you now some of the people I met who are both suffering from and also solving the tragedy of indoor open fires for cooking and heating. Household air pollution from cooking fires is the fourth greatest health risk globally, and it's the #1 killer of women in the developing world. When I learned this, I was stunned because I knew that I wasn't aware of it, and actually nobody I knew was aware of that. So I started thinking about the time I spent with women and their families in these closed spaces that were smoky. Sometimes, just for cooking, and other times all day long and into the evening for heating. The Mayo Clinic helped me pull together these numbers to explain the number of people and how they die that's related to indoor pollution. As you can see, a tremendous number of them die with heart-related issues. And that's something I know this group is very focused on. And the cost is extraordinary. It's killing their babies. If you look at this, image, you can just see smoke on every woman's face. The results of what they go through, what their lives really are about. And I think all of us have been in smoky places, and like this woman, you want to get away. Every cell in your body is saying, get away from that smoke. But a lot of people don't have that option. And I've been like this woman, many times, just taking the tail of my shirt and wiping my eyes and trying to see clearly and trying to get it out of my nose and my throat. So when you live in it every single day, for hours at a day, you can just imagine the toll it takes on your lungs, on your heart, on your eyes, and on your kids. And some of the accelerants that are used to, fire the flames are not only dangerous, but they're toxic. So they add to the pollution that's entering the lungs and hearts of these families. And yet, most people in the world cook this way. And most women are the ones doing the cooking. And they usually have their kids with them. These are some of the diseases caused by cooking fires. Respiratory, pulmonary, cancer, eye disease. And tragically, there are thousands who die every year because of burns, because open fires catch fire. I think of my own kids and my grandkids, and thinking of them wandering around a room like this with an open fire is terrifying to me, because they so easily can tumble and fall into the fire. And these fires burn down a lot of homes, and they hurt a lot of people in the process. This mom bravely saved her 2 daughters, but she lost her home when the fire took over. And you can imagine now she's dealing with 2 little girls who need a lot of attention, a lot of health care, and she had to find a new place to live. Half the kids who die from pneumonia, the greatest killer of kids under age 5, it's due to household air pollution. Because they're exposed to it from the minute they're conceived. They're in smoke all through gestation. And when they're born, they're usually strapped to their mother's backs, still in all that smoke, still inhaling what she's inhaling. And their little bodies just sometimes are not strong enough to deal with it, and they get pneumonia. And the thing that's really hard for me is that this is actually preventable. And we have to be part of the solution for these families. The little girls stay in the kitchen. Even after, they're starting to grow up, they're mom's helpers. The boys are playing outside, but the girls are kind of brought into this smoky world from infancy, and then they come back as kids, as helpers. So I started getting really angry many years ago, and I decided to look for solutions. And like most solutions, I found the first real activity in a surprising space. It was the conservationists who realized that deforestation was rampant in countries where they cooked with wood. The cook stoves are incredibly inefficient. And so it's unfortunately not the healthcare industry that brought the most attention to this problem. It was the conservationists who were worried about what was happening to the environment. And it's everywhere. If you travel in the developing world, you're going to see women who spend hours every day gathering wood for fires, because they have to provide for their families' meals every single day. And they've got to go further and further to get this wood, to cut it down, to carry it back, to build the fires that are killing them and their kids. It's really heartbreaking to see. But it's everywhere. Every scrap of wood can be part of a fire. The second group that was taking charge of this entire problem is women themselves. Women were sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so they started learning how to build ventilation to get that smoke out of their kitchens, out of their homes. And as soon as they developed a few skills, they would teach other women. These women are building a safer stove, not just a 3-stone, traditional stove. And they're building ventilation. You can see the pipes that will carry the smoke away. The coolest group I ever worked with was a group of Maasai women in Tanzania. And they live in bomas, like behind these women you can see. It's the traditional housing for the Maasai people. And they would go out every single day. I walked with them for 2 hours to one boma. And they got there, got dirt and water, and started making mortar. They brought 2 donkeys that were carrying bricks. They jumped up on the roof of one of the huts, cut a hole in the roof, and started really carefully building a safe chimney. And they had levels, and they had so many things that made sure that this was not just slapped together. They were very serious about it. And this is the woman whose home they just built a chimney for. And you can see that she's kind of overwhelmed that strangers would come and help make her life bearable. And I kind of love this picture because, you see the women up finishing the chimney on top of one of the huts, and below them is a little girl carrying her baby sister and witnessing that women can make these changes. It's very empowering. Other wonderful organizations like Solar Sister build the stoves and then hire the women with a kind of business in a bag. So they go to all the families they know around, they explain what a difference the stove has made in their lives, and they set up a payment plan with their neighbors and other villagers to do the same for their homes. So everyone benefits. And they have to learn how to cook on these new stoves too. It's really interesting. Women know that if the chapatis taste bad, their families aren't going to be happy. So there's a lot of learning how to use this new technology, not only to stay healthier, but also to make great food. But the thing that blows me away is when I see the kitchens now. I see that, from going from a cave, kind of a dark, dank hovel, to kitchens that are clean and open and families that are safe in them, is deeply satisfying. Look at this kitchen. It's smoke-free. And here a woman who's got a clean cook stove is teaching girls how to cook on it. This woman was testing stoves in India. She was part of the research team to give feedback on the height of the stove, the quality of the food, all of that. How empowering. And you can see now her daughters are in a safe kitchen. And there are many different kinds of stoves, and none of them are perfect. And each country and each culture is different. But every effort to try to solve this problem and make kitchens cleaner and safer is worth doing. Thank you so much.
So I think if that doesn't humanize this problem, I'm not sure what can. Certainly, I'm going to go to the panel. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Mickelson. You have been a champion for cardiovascular disease prevention as a celebrated director for WHO CVDs for a number of years. We have always felt that indoor air pollution is a problem of which the most vulnerable populations, children, women, have been relatively resistant to its vascular effects. But if you look at the pictures from Annie Griffiths, we certainly see that this is not the case. We have spent a long time really focused on climate control strategies, outdoor air pollution, and rightly and deservedly so, these are issues that require a lot of effort. But tell us how big the issue of indoor air pollution is in the greater picture, and using that as a background, tell us a little bit about what we can do in order to mitigate this issue.
Thank you very much, and I must say the pictures were both heartbreaking but also beautiful and gave some hope. And I also would like to congratulate the World Heart Federation because, and I hope Maria Nera is in agreement, I think this is also an example where an NGO, a civil society, a community can really raise awareness. And that's sort of a little bit of my entry point. So since we have fabulous experts on the team, I will not be going deep on lots of numbers, but I had to remind myself, preparing for this panel, that it's actually 2.1 billion people worldwide that is still dependent on this polluting way of cooking. And the pictures show that as well, that you can even see how this is set up. It's really the children, the females, and also, it was not so clear here, but in humanitarian settings. So it's really hitting hard on the most vulnerable people of the world. So what to do? Again, I think when we think about this as a single issue, it's almost incredible to understand why we were not able to change this earlier. Because when we are talking about technology here, it's quite simple technology. So I had sort of this thought this morning that where is the private sector here? This is a market for very simple technology all around the world. So that was a little bit of my sort of own reflections. But what we need to do is not, again, rocket science. We need to do what we usually do when we raise an agenda. We need to start and continue, in this case, to raise awareness. We need to do this in partnership with those who are concerned and co-create. And I think the pictures show that very clearly. It's not to provide one solution. They have to test in their own settings. They have to make their own choices, and then they will be our ever best advocates. And then for us as an organization and other organization, we need to amplify these solutions and the success stories. I think the inspiration of success is in this case also important. Of course, there is more that needs to be done, and again, we would dream and hope for that also this issue is tackled in the National Health Plan. I'm 100% certain that the business case in this cases is giving high return of investment, and if that's not done, we should also translate the solution and the impact into figures, so the ministers of finance in these countries can see the real investment and hopefully choose this investment. And I looked at different statistics as well, and Maria will for sure talk about it, but in addition to what WHO provide, I looked at the Clean Cooking Alliance. So having also measures both from official sources, but maybe also among partnership in civil society could really help. So I'll start with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mickelson, for really starting the way or leading the way into strategies that we can employ, and certainly I'll talk about a little bit more of the implementation as we go on. I want to delve a little bit deeper into some of the things you said by actually going to Dr. Prabhakaran. I mean, you have an expansive portfolio of work in environmental health research, and you've worked closely with the government of India as it pertains to climate-smart healthcare. I want to know a little bit about what protocols or key indicators, including key health indicators, we should really be employing in order to further assess the impact of indoor air pollution on cardiovascular health risk, and whether these protocols should actually differ in those, as Dr. Mickelson has stated, and as we've seen in the pictures by Annie Griffiths, if these protocols should really differ in the populations that are really most vulnerable. That's the first aspect. And the second aspect I hope you can touch about is a little bit about the major initiative in India, Ujjwala Yojana 2.0, what it is, what reviews it's gotten in India, and whether we can use any of the lessons learned to make it more scalable and adaptable to other low and middle income countries.
Good morning, everyone. At the outset, I want to thank World Art Federation and the organizers for the opportunity to be on this panel. Pictures tell the story. I know the poignant, the way it was captured in that presentation, I think speaks volumes of the issue at hand. And I think for all of us here, when we talk about air pollution, it's probably the second risk factor globally for deaths now. We often speak to the outdoor air pollution, ambient air pollution. So I think this is very timely that you have a panel here focusing on the indoor air quality, not least because the statistics show that they contribute to nearly half of the morbidity and mortality from exposure to poor air quality. And I think it's about time that we focus on this, because we spend a good amount of time indoors, and not just our homes, but our work environments, schools, and the indoor environments really mean that exposure to the criteria of pollutants in these environments, closed environments, means that we are exposed to sometimes 1,000 times more the concentration. And we know the dose-response relationships, so the higher the concentration, the health impacts are going to be harder to deal with. And the picture also told us about the inequities. So for a country like India and many other countries, I think in the global south, indoor air quality is an issue that is staring us in the face, especially the inequities. And I want to remind myself about a study that we did in a capital city, Delhi, which is known as the dubious distinction it has of being the air pollution capital of the world. And it's not just across countries, but even within countries, within cities, within households that these inequities exist. And the study that we did actually did an exposure profiling of a couple. We did about 100 people, but within a household, the husband was what you call a rickshaw puller, who spent his day going around the city of Delhi, while his wife stayed indoors. They carried a backpack for 24 hours, which had an air quality monitor and a GPS monitor, which kind of did a profiling of the amount of time they spent walking around. The filter that we got from the lady, the housewife, actually was pitch black. The concentrations of the PM 2.5 in that filter were 5 times that of her husband's, who spent his time actually outdoors, which actually calls to attention the fact that we haven't paid attention to indoor air quality guidelines. I know WHO has some guidelines for indoor air quality, but many of our countries do not even have guidelines. Forget standards, we don't even have guidelines that speak to indoor air quality. And I think the fact that it is the women, the inequities, that they are exposed to in terms of these closed environments, often one-room tenements in many parts of rural India, but also in urban slums in our cities, where there may be one window or no window, no chimneys. So that's very heartening to see that there were women involved in this initiative to kind of address the issue. And it's not just the women. I think most of the graphics capture the women, but they are the primary caregivers. So you often have the toddlers around them who are exposed not just during their pregnancy, but even after birth and their early years to really high levels of pollutants. So in terms of actually the indicators, you were talking about protocols. I don't think we have any protocols, and it's about time. But I think whatever the pathogenetic mechanisms that have been studied with respect to the mechanisms in which air pollution impacts health, inflammation, there was a lot of focus in the earlier session. It's definitely one of the pathways, oxidative stress, all of which leads to, in terms of the cardiovascular risk, endothelial dysfunction, the inflammatory process, the plaque formation. And I think protocols really should address those mechanisms, and they're not far different from what we do for ambient air quality. It's just, I think we need to distill it down to the populations that we're addressing. And I think a gender-sensitive approach is really important, given the focus we saw on women in those pictures, but also our future demographic dividend, young children being exposed to those high levels of pollutants. You wanted me to speak to the program. I think worldwide there has been an effort to kind of address some of these issues. I think clean energy transitions, clean cook stoves, you saw some of those. But I want to speak to a program in my country, in India, which was launched in 2016, which really was very timely. We call it the airpocalypse year. We saw the worst air pollution. It made, I think, The Guardian, New York Times, BBC, everybody talked about air pollution in Delhi. So this program was rolled out by the Prime Minister, by the government. It was called the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana. Pradhan Mantri is Prime Minister, Ujjwal, bringing some light. It focused on the women. The primary beneficiary was the woman of the household. It was targeted at households below the poverty line, with income levels less than $2 a day. And the idea was to give to these households, in a massive approach, a cleaner cooking option, which was the LPG, the liquefied petroleum, the gas cylinders. It also did some other strategies, like asking the households at the middle class societies to give up their subsidies so that the benefits could reach these poorer households. In terms of footprint, I would say that yes, they reached their targets in terms of they wanted to reach initially 2 billion households. The version 2 is saying 5 crore households. And I think in terms of distribution, it certainly reached the households. The problem is in the continuity and sustainability of the program. And anecdotally, because there hasn't been a real evaluation of the program, but anecdotally we know that there have been issues in terms of uptake and continuity of this program, not least because there's a problem in acquiring a second cylinder or the third, but also the fact that there is an element of uptake at the household level. The women are forced to continue using their traditional cook stoves, the chulas as we call them, because the men folk like the rotis that are cooked on the chulas. Can you imagine? And this means that there is a different kind of a nudge factor that is required. I think what we call behavior change communication. We need to tell our women that there is a health impact, not just for them, but also for their children. So, you're given this clean cooking option, use it, because it means not just your health, but that of your children. I'll stop there.
That's so powerful. I mean, we have talked about so many strategies. You talked about industry, Dr. Mickelson. Now we're talking about behavioral change. I want to talk even further about how we can actually implement some of these changes. So I'm going to go to you, Dr. Fernandez. Thank you for being here. You're the Vice President of UT Health Houston, President of Population Health and Implementation Science. So you really translate innovations into real-world settings. So what do you think is going to be, one, the most effective in raising awareness and from a global perspective, the role of advocacy, but how do you also feel we can achieve clean kitchen atmospheres at this point in time, and really, more applicable to low and middle income countries? And then, I hope you could, further talk to whether there are lessons that we may have learned in terms of advances in outdoor air pollution that may be applicable in this setting as well.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So I'd like to begin by just mentioning that many of the approaches, and also what we've heard in this conference and other topic areas have underpinnings in both health promotion and implementation science, right? We've heard about things related to engagement, community voice, planning, and all of these areas I think are really important in this particular topic. I think that from a health promotion perspective, for example, focusing on multi-level approaches that not only motivate and educate, but also enable these behaviors, right, with environmental changes. And we saw some amazing examples in the pictures. And in the last comments, the importance of not only educating and motivating the women, but also their spouses, their family members, so that this becomes a social norm, right? And not just a perceived social norm, but an actual norm. I think this is critical, and this is sort of, again, foundational processes when you think about comprehensive health promotion interventions. Co-creating with communities, and we saw, again, good illustrations of that in the pictures, is also critical because it ensures not only the relevance, but also locally tailored approaches, as well as approaches that can be sustainable. And then I think implementation science offers many tools, both in adapting evidence-based approaches, because we know that there are good approaches out there that have worked. Many of them have been implemented in sort of more of a study or trial setting. We can still learn a lot about implementation there, but when you're going into real-world settings that then are free of intensive monitoring that happens often during studies, you have to ensure that there are approaches that can maintain the benefits over time. So the implementation science offers tools for identifying what the contextual factors may be that are influencing not only behavioral change, but also those environmental changes that are critical. And I think in particular, incorporating that community voice and participatory approaches for adaptation are going to be critical. You asked about advocacy. You know, I often, I'm a behavioral scientist and remind people that policymakers are people too. We heard mention of the importance of and the power of narratives, not only in our communities to enable and to motivate women and families to engage in these behaviors, but narratives are also incredibly powerful for changing policy. And I think, you know, using images like the ones that we've seen, using stories, but also creating arguments that have numbers and economics, right? Health outcomes, but also economic advantages can be really important and powerful in changing policy. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fernandez. I think actually that segues beautifully into Dr. Nera. Dr. Nera, I want you to really take us home. I think you're the perfect person to do this. You know, you have very passionately advocated for clean air, the impact of public health, you know, on premature deaths and cardiovascular disease. So tell us, you know, while we integrate air quality improvement into national cardiovascular prevention guidelines, really what role should policy interventions play in assessing indoor air pollution to mitigate cardiovascular risk, particularly in low and middle income countries? And then tell us a little bit about, you know, from a global health perspective, how we can use these policy changes to really drive global frameworks, especially as we approach the High Levels United Nations meeting in September.
Thank you very much. And let me start by saying how happy I am to be here for many reasons, not only because I see old friends and I have the opportunity to exchange with this wonderful community, but because as well, and Bente knows that very well, for many years we have been trying to create exactly this bridge that you are now accelerating, the bridge between the community of non-communicable diseases, the World Heart Federation and others, and air pollution, which is now one of the biggest risks for public health and one of the biggest challenges we are facing. As you heard already by the very distinguished panelists, some of them very good friends as well, and others, they will become, I'm sure, is now one of the greatest challenges we are facing because it's responsible, air pollution altogether, for more than 7 million premature deaths every year. And this is something that your community, the World Health Federation, has to be very much involved on it. And that's why this meeting today, this panel, is making me so happy. One of your banners is about aspiration. Let me share with you my aspiration of all of this community. A few weeks ago, we had the second global conference on air pollution and health in Cartagena de Indias in Colombia. Some of you were very heavily represented, even if not physically, others were very much following, where we were presenting not only the latest in terms of scientific evidence, but as well in terms of interventions, and where you can have an intervention in order to reduce this major public health problem. And one of the slides that were presented there, and for me one of the most powerful ones, and I think it's important for your advocacy as well, is that the Vice Minister of Health from China, he presented on a slide where he demonstrated, and we have all the scientific evidence, so it's not just a greenwash, that they were able to reduce air pollution in the biggest cities in China, and at the same time, the GDP was going up. And I say this is important because one of the comments that at the global level, in the global political agenda will say is that all of this is very expensive. Tackling the causes of air pollution, tackling the causes of climate change, which, by the way, overlap on around 80%. So when we mitigate climate change, we are mitigating as well air pollution. And this is the message that WHO has been passing around of all of these COPs and other big international fora. We need to accelerate the transition to clean, renewable sources of energy. And this is the biggest intervention we need to do if we want to reduce household air pollution, outdoor air pollution. By the way, among all the data you get here, which was extremely powerful, we need to say as well that indoor air pollution, household air pollution, is contributing to outdoor air pollution. So for those who are not 100% convinced, we need to tell them that they are breathing as well that air, even if their houses are very good and they don't have this type of cooking that other people is forced to have. So at the international level, what we are doing is to make sure that people understand that air pollution is one of the biggest risk factors for non-communicable diseases, the one that maybe has been a little bit less considered, and now we need your voices very strongly in all the policy fora. For instance, recently the European Parliament has adopted a new directive on clean air. You will start to see the benefits on the cardiovascular health of the citizens in Europe very soon. The moment they will start to implement this directive on air quality, following the standards of WHO, the guidelines on air quality, you will see the benefit on the cardiovascular diseases. And we will all need to be ready to start to have and count and quantify all of those health benefits. But you know what helped a lot on the approval of this directive at the European Commission, which, as you can imagine, it was politically very challenging? The voice of cardiologists, the voice of professionals like you, the voice of federations and associations and those who care about non-communicable diseases and cardiovascular diseases. Because this association between politicians and even pediatricians, they have been incredible as well in pushing for that. And this is one of my first recommendations. Your voices in each country, they need to be very high on the political agenda. You need to help us to say that air pollution, and in this case, household air pollution, is one of the biggest public health risks that our populations are facing. In some countries, definitely more than others, but is a risk that we need to reduce if we want to protect care and provide results for our community affected by cardiovascular diseases, and more than anything, prevent it. At the international level as well, is important this connection with the climate change agenda, because one of the benefits of mitigating the causes of climate change will be an immediate reduction on the levels of air pollution. And that is why, again, your voice in all of those, we have been attending the COPs, negotiating, telling all the negotiators that they are not just negotiating with emissions, but they are negotiating as well with how many cases of cardiovascular diseases we are going to have if they don't take the decisions we need to take. So for WHO, this is really a critical issue, and we appreciate enormously this collaboration that we are establishing. I think more and more this collaboration is paying very good results. We want you promoting the air quality guidelines of WHO. That will be fantastic. All the interventions that we have to, at the household level to promote a transition to clean sources of cooking is one aspect and is fundamental. You saw the pictures, it's fundamental. But we need to keep in mind that people need, they do at the household level, they cook, but they heat, they need energy as well to heat and to light. So we end up sometimes in some studies with very good improved cook stove and still an open fire in some societies. So what we need to ensure is a proper transition to LPG or whatever is the initiative, depending on the country, to make sure that people is not forced to cook like in the Stone Age, because those open fires is meaning that half of our entire population is cooking like in the Stone Age, on an open fire, putting inside whatever is available, keeping the girls at home, not going to school. So we have equity, we have education, we have gender issues, we have health issues, but that's why if you help us to transition to clean sources of energy, to elevate the voice of this community into the air pollution and the climate change agenda, I think we can obtain incredible results, and we will start soon to measure and quantify those health benefits from adopting those recommendations and guidelines for outdoor air pollution and for indoor air pollution, and transitioning quickly as soon as possible to cleaner sources of energy. A lot of projects and initiatives we can do together. You were mentioning, Bente, the need for the private sector here. There is sustainable energy for all. There are many fora where they are trying to promote this private sector and different initiatives. There is as well, and maybe you can, WHO has been very strong and is very strong on the SDG 7, you know, the Sustainable Development Goal for access to clean, affordable sources of energy. And there are plenty of indicators and all of that, but health has to be there, and we need to measure that on the benefits that we will obtain for this particular community. So again, thank you very much, and very happy to have this collaboration and partnership.
Well, thank you. I think that's beautifully summarized, really a call to action in many ways, and I think we're exactly at time, so thank you very much to this esteemed panel.
Thank you.